Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to our Outliners video series here. I'm your host, John Raab, joined by my wonderful co-host, Mr. Doug Lyle. Doug, how you doing?
Great to be here, and especially with Mark.
Exactly. We got none other than best-selling author Marc Cameron. You guys might know him from, a couple things that he's done in the past. And most recently, we're talking about Bad River, which came out in July. So, Mark, we are so happy to have you. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. This is great.
Now, you're still in Alaska, right? You're all the way up in frontier country.
I am. It's already late fall here. The trees have lost their leaves mostly, and I'm cooking a pork butt out front right now.
Nice. Nothing like a pork butt out front.
I love it. I love
Yep. Yep. I'm going to be up there in May for our 30th wedding anniversary. Never been to Alaska, so we're going to take a little cruise and check out the frontier, but it'll be great to see that for once.
Oh, good. Yeah, those cruises are amazing. It shows you some beautiful parts of Alaska.
Yeah. So let's get into Bad River a little bit. Came out in
John,
July.
can you turn on sharing so I can show the cover?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Then I can show the
it
cover.
came out in July.
Yeah.
So let's get into a little bit about what you got going on here in Bad River.
Yeah, so it's the sixth in the Arliss Cutter series. Arliss Cutter is a deputy marshal based in Alaska. He's moved up here to help his widowed sister-in-law. And like I say, this is number 6, and a lot of the questions that get posed during the first 5 books get answered during this particular book. And of course, like any series, that a lot more questions pop up, but this does tie up a lot of the overarching questions that have been going on, like what happened to his brother? Was he murdered? Was he not murdered? That kind of thing.
Cool.
Well, I assume there's going to be more coming down the road.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, I have one that has to be turned in, terrifyingly so, in about 3 weeks. But so I have contracts for a couple more, and so yeah, Arliss and Mim aren't going anywhere. We just anybody who reads Bad River will know that although some questions are answered, there's a big one that pops up at the end. So yeah, it's great fun, and that's what I did for a living for 22 years. So my wife and I moved to Alaska in 1998 after several years with the Marshal Service, and so I moved up here as what we call a POD, just plain old deputy, and then promoted and worked my way up to chief. But during that time, I ran the Fugitive Task Force. I was all over Alaska. Got to see just the amazing diversity of the geography of the state and the cultures of the state, and it just makes for such a great character. I mean, I think the star of these books, my publisher calls them Alaska noir. They're crime novels set in Alaska, kind of gritty, kind of dark. Like I would pose that they're like real life, but I think that Alaska is the star, where Arliss, Lola Tauriki, his partner, and everybody else, and Mim, they're kind of secondary characters.
Yeah, love it.
How do you handle the winters up there? I mean, I know it's cold, but it's also dark. Do you play those into many of the stories?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
So the next story is called Deadline, 2 words, and it's about an extremely cold, the coldest I've ever been out in Alaska, well, anywhere, is 58 below. And once you've been past 20 below, it all just sort of, it all feels the same. It just does worse things to you. You drop your keys in the snow, and if you have to take your glove off to find them, when it's 50 below, you risk frostbite and losing a finger, so very quickly. So again, Alaska is a big character, and of course then the weather is a big character. My wife and I both, like I say, we've lived here almost 29 years now, and it's a the dark takes something to get used to, but so does the light. I mean, my wife's she fills one freezer up with fish we have one freezer devoted to her salmon and halibut catch, and when it's summertime, she never stops. We have a saying up here that every day in Alaska is worth 2 days and summers are 3. So you just get exhausted. So by the time winter's here, it's nice to curl up by the fire with some caribou or moose stew and just write. And of
butt.
course, yeah, and pork butt. I have to be honest, we do leave to go to visit our friends in the South Pacific most winters and stay for a month or sometimes two.
Need a little break, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when you're looking at, the series and you're looking at, at the books, what is the biggest thing that kind of keeps driving you back? Is it the characters? Is it just the love for the writing? What is your passion? What is it that just keeps you coming back to that computer to want to just keep typing away?
Well, the characters, I want to see what they're up to. My MO would be to think up some scenario, whether it's chasing a bad, what I try to do is I try to figure out what the bad guys are up to, what their primary goal is, and then set them up to win, and then set my characters up, who in a series I get to know them over the course of the series. And they're not, although they're not based on any one person, they're certainly inspired by many of the just incredible, stellar folks that I've been able to work with over my, 30 years in law enforcement and outside of law enforcement, just great mentors and great people. So I just set these bad guys up and put them on this trajectory to get what they want, and then set my good guys up in a intercepting trajectory, and then watch how the story plays out and let my characters be. Now I plot pretty heavily, but the book doesn't, I don't stick to it. I hardly, in fact, I try to get 2,000 words a day, and yesterday I got a net loss of about 3,500 words because I decided it wasn't moving like I wanted it to, so I excised some of it and saved it for a few. It's still relevant to the character's story, but it just doesn't move like I wanted it to, so it goes in the boneyard.
The boneyard's important. Never delete, just move, because it'll
That's
come
right.
back. You'll be three novels down the road, and you'll say, that stuff I wrote 2 years ago.
That is exactly right. That's exactly right. Sometimes, I think most writers, all writers learn this eventually, but sometimes you got to write 3 chapters before you get to the first sentence of your book.
Exactly.
But those 3 chapters are vital. You had to write them to get to Once Upon a Time,
Right.
Now you've also written other series, obviously. Yeah, you had the Jericho series, and you've got 7 or 8 books in that.
8, yeah.
Yeah, and then of course Clancy. How did that come about, and how did you end up doing that series?
I was just very fortunate to meet and become friends with Mark Graney, and he had done 7 and was stepping away to focus on his gray man stuff. And we had I think we met at Long Beach at a Bouchercon conference in Long Beach. And several years later, when he was deciding to step away, he asked me what I was writing and offered to give me a cover quote. And I was working on, I think, the second to the last Jericho at that time, a book called Field of Fire. And so I sent it to him, and he gave me a very nice cover quote. But in the background, unbeknownst to me, Tom Colgan, the editor of the Jack Ryan series, had asked Mark who he thought would be good to take over for him. And Mark sent him my manuscript, and they called me out of the blue. I had no idea, absolutely no idea. If you look on my Facebook author page, there's a pinned picture of me looking like I'm having a stroke. And I probably very, very nearly am. My wife we were on the beach in Florida kind of looking around the area where Arliss Cutter is from, the character in the Cutter books. And so we're on the Gulf Coast of Florida, just kind of kicking around the beach. And my phone rang. It was my agent. And for some reason, my wife, even though it looks like I'm dying there, she took a photo instead of calling 911. And so it's preserved in history, the moment that I heard that I was being offered that position. So it was a great and terrifying honor, but it's so fun.
That's what I was going to ask is, when did the panic sink in?
Yeah.
Like, oh my God.
Immediately. Immediately. I told my agent is Robin Rue, just a fabulous agent with Writer's House, and she's been my agent for 25 years now. And I told her I probably had a dozen reasons why I shouldn't. I mean, I got this other Jericho, and then we're gonna do the cutter, and there's no way I can do this. And she just you should listen to me, and then
Yes.
very, very calmly said, Mark, this is Clancy, don't around. And I said,
Yeah,
okay, all right, right.
exactly.
And it turned out to be a difficult, but I told Tom Colgan, the editor, one time,
I love
told him,
Tom Colgan. He is
oh,
such a
he's
great
such a
guy.
good,
Oh, he's such a sweetheart.
yeah, and he's a real writer's editor. He's communicative when he knows you're about to go into full bore linear panic because it's not done or it's not good. He calms you down, tells you, he's one of those people that can say, get it to me on time, but take all the time you need, all in the same, make it good. But I told him, if you ever ask someone to do these books and they're not terrified, you've asked the wrong person, because this is not something you go into flippantly.
Right.
Clancy's characters are iconic, and it doesn't matter if you pour your heart and soul into it. There's going to be some people that just hate your guts because you're not Tom Clancy. So that's just the way it is.
Yeah. What are you going to do about it? Yeah.
But I mean, to be so versatile in writing a Clancy, which is 150,000 words, that you have to get into, and then the voice and everything to keep, and then getting into your, into your solo, into your books. I mean, how is that transition? I mean, that's got to be difficult.
Well, I think the difficult thing was, and difficult might not even be the right word. I think the important thing was to keep the characters like people have expected them to be. And I talked to Don Bentley and Mike Madden and the guys that were writing the juniors while I was working on the Jack Ryan senior books, and we came to the conclusion that our job was not to write like Clancy. Well, first of all, Tom Colgan said, don't write like Tom Clancy, write the best Marc Cameron book you can in the spirit of Tom Clancy. So it would be impossible for me to get Clancy's voice. But on the flip side of that, Clancy wrote a certain way because he was writing in the 80s and 90s. We as readers were different in the 80s and 90s. We didn't have a lot of TLDR, too long didn't read, at the bottom of every, or every, well, we didn't even have the internet, but every internet news story you read tells you exactly how long it is. 2-minute read, 3-minute read, because they're afraid you'll be scared off if it's a long read. Well, obviously, Clancy, it would have said, this chapter is a 3-hour read, because you had to get into it. And we love that. We absolutely love that. But modern readers only put up with so much of that. And Clancy, I believe, I never met him, but I believe he was so smart that he would have written a little different book for modern readers. And so Mike Madden and Don Bentley and I all came to the conclusion that our job was not to write like Tom Clancy. Our job was to make readers feel like they felt when they read a Tom Clancy back in the 80s and 90s. So give them the right characters, keep true to those characters, give them military set pieces, give them enough espionage. Since I was not in the military, my son is a Air Force physician and was an OSI agent before that. But and I have lots of friends in the military, but my Clancy books tend to lean very heavily on espionage and, the Secret Service and law enforcement and the intelligence community and federal law enforcement community, which parts of Clancy's did as well. And then I would rely very heavily on my military friends and then contacts with the Pentagon to help me flesh out those. I mean, the thing about the Jericho books are essentially that same kind of global
Feel,
geopolitical book. I mean, that's the book they were reading when Tom Colgan gave me the nod to do it. But and they were, I mean, a couple of Jericho books hit the Times. They were doing well. I was able to retire, but they weren't Clancy's by a long shot. And so when I got the job for the Clancy estate, I was able to call up people at the Pentagon and say, hey, I'm writing the next Jack Ryan. Can you help me? And they were like, why, sure. I mean, so they never would have done that with my books. And now I was just back at the Pentagon last week for some briefings and chatting with some folks and focusing on a new Jericho down the line. So Clancy definitely opens doors. It was an incredible opportunity. At the same time, it was gut wrenching. And my wife would always say, every July, she'd say, "Oh my gosh, you're coming down with the Jack Ryan flu again," because you just get so focused and headachy and angry at the world because you're just hyper focused on this and just trying to get it right.
I could see that for sure.
How many did you do in the series so far? Are you
7.
going to do others?
7.
No, I did. It's funny when I did 7. Mark Graney did 7. I felt it was inappropriate. I would like to say I was such a mensch that I didn't want to outdo the number that Mark did, but I just 7 was actually 6 was my number that I had in mind, and then we made a deal for a 7th, and I did that one, and that was a good fun book to do. But it was there comes a time when you have to kind of bet on yourself and bet on the future of your own stuff. And Mark told me, I thanked him, of course, profusely for recommending me back when I first started. And he just kind of looked at me with that all-knowing look of Mark Graney's and said, "Yeah, we'll see what you think after you've done a couple. see if you thank me then."
Exactly.
Yeah, Mark and I have had a lot of conversations about him in the Clancy books and whatnot, and yeah, he would say that a lot too.
So you have these two series. Is there anything smoldering back there about another series that may,
or maybe another?
I know how these things come up and keep you awake at night. Like, I'd really like to move over to some. Is any of that going on?
Oh, I mean, you're writers. It's you get that creative wake up, like you say, wake up in the middle of the night and, man, I got this cool idea for a urban fantasy book, and I tell my agent about it, and she goes, "Oh my gosh, don't skip over to another genre right now. Exactly. Your readers won't follow you." And so I just keep that. It's with my boneyard. I have another file of just ideas, but right now I am busy enough writing 2 books a year that we haven't made an official announcement about it. I guess I'm semi-officially announcing that we're going to do another Jericho. Not sure of the dates yet, but a couple more Jerichos, hopefully. So working on a couple of cutters, and then so I've got enough contracts to keep me busy for a couple of years. Which that's great in a writing world. Being overworked is the blessing.
Do you tend to go backwards and forth in writing the series? Write one, then write the other. Write one, write.
That's what that was the plan was. With the Jerichos and the cutters, and then the first cutter was almost done when I got the Clancy gig, and the last Jericho that I wrote was coming out at that time. A book about set in Cuba called Active Measures, and that one came out. The Jericho came out, then I finished the first Clancy that I did called Power and Empire, and then I was able to polish up the cutter and then start a new cutter, and then I would just go back and forth. And so now my plan is to write a couple of finish up this contract for the cutters that I have now, and then do the Jericho, and then a cutter into Jericho. But I really want to write a book, and we'll see what I get. A lot of reader emails. There's a character in the cutters. It's his grandfather. He's passed away. His name's everybody calls him Grumpy. He's got a stone face, kind of like I do. And in fact, Vicky we would watch Justified, this show about. Everybody knows Justified, right? And my wife would remind me. She'd say, "You're not Raylan, you're Art. You're the bald-headed chief." And so I think when people ask me if I'm Arliss, no, Arliss is so much cooler than I ever was. But if I'm anybody, I'm that old codger, grumpy grandfather. Because I have grandsons that were kind of the inspiration for Arliss's nephews. So I would really like to do a spin-off book,
sort of a prequel.
A prequel of
when he was younger.
Grumpy it'd be back in my day. I started in '84, and Grumpy Cutter started back in the early '80s. So it would be a fun, kind of like the Swaggart, the Stephen Hunter, going different generations of the same mentality. So who knows if that'll ever come to fruition. I think
that would be great.
A lot of emails about it.
Going back in time is So for so many things, forensic science, criminal investigation, procedures, everything was totally different 40 years ago.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. We did my first homicide that I ever investigated. DNA was not a
No,
thing.
didn't
And
exist.
we knew that there, there was blood typing and some
Right.
blood pattern, things like that. And so we would take that evidence. That's why you see so many, you guys know, I mean, you're a
Yeah.
scientist. So um, there were things that we could do, but now there's so many cases that are getting solved in the,
From blood
back
collected back
cold
then
cases.
Going
just to
back.
do blood typing. Exactly. And they stored it properly.
Yeah.
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 Well,
Cold
Mark,
case.
I'm telling you, I think that you should take those standalone books and name them a series and just call them Books from the Boneyard. And and that's the name of your standalone series, is it just Books from the Boneyard? And
Well, there could be a lot of them. There's a lot of
yeah,
bones in the boneyard.
and you just tell your agent, look, I'm going to write an urban fantasy from the Boneyard, and that's just what it's going to happen.
Actually, that's
I
a
think
very good idea.
that is a real good idea.
No
That is
one's
a
ever
good idea.
named a standalone series. Like they always just say, here's a standalone. Well, hey, take all your standalones and call them Books from the Boneyard. I
There's some
mean,
wisdom in that. There is some wisdom in that.
no, but so as we kind of get to the end here, I just want to remind everybody that the book Bad River is out, and markcameronbooks.com is the main website for you, for all fans to kind of find out everything that you have going on. What kind of social media are you a little more active on, where fans interact with you and maybe get a signed copy of Bad River or any other books you got coming up?
I'm not super active on social media. Lately I have been because Bad River came out, but I'm reachable on Instagram, just at Marc Cameron Books, and then on Facebook at Marc Cameron Author. And then every once in a while I'll get on X/Twitter and check what's on there. But I kind
I
of look
check
at
it real
that as
fast
the,
and leave.
yeah, I check, it's the toilet stall wall of the internet kind of a
Yep.
thing. It just gets, well, I guess it's more me than anything. I get tied up in social media and I start looking at stuff and checking on my friends, and then I've wasted 2 hours. And when you're writing two books a year, that is not something that you have the luxury of
Yeah.
doing. And I want to spend time with my grandkids. My
Yeah.
oldest grandson's 13 now, and I was in Japan visiting their family. My wife and I had gone over there for Christmas, I think. He was about 5, and he ran in the room with his shoes off and kind of slid to a stop right in front of me. And he looked up and he goes, "Papa, Papa, writing another book. Who'd have thought?" And then turned around and walked away. And
Oh,
there was a lot of wisdom from a 5-year-old there. So now I'm very cognizant of the fact that these times they're fleeting, and I don't
same.
want to just have my nose buried in a computer or a notepad all the time.
Yeah, we have
I
a
think that's
7-year-old
so
granddaughter.
insightful. I think everybody wants to write a book and everybody wants to be a writer. I guarantee you 100% of people do. Uh, but you don't see the dark side of it. And that's where you
Yeah.
sit alone in a room and you isolate yourself from family and friends and activities in the world for so much of your
Hmm.
life. You have to love it. You have to love it.
Yeah.
You
It's
I
an
know,
mean,
illness.
it
we have a
is an
Definitely an
illness.
7-year-old.
It
illness.
is an illness.
We have a 7-year-old granddaughter, and we will get the candid responses from her.
Yes,
For
exactly.
Oh
sure.
yeah. Oh yeah, they know when you're ignoring them. And I had a moment years and years ago. So that grandson's father and I used to run together all the time, and he's the one that's the Air Force doc now. But when he was in the 7th grade, I guess we were running. We had like a 5-mile loop around our house, or 3.5-mile loop, I guess. And he got to where he was running it twice. And I was younger and in much better shape that back then, and we were running together, and we'd talk and all that. And then one afternoon we got done and he goes, "Dad, you want to go outside and, shoot baskets or whatever, mess around outside, do something?" And I said, "Not right now. I gotta write. I gotta do this."
Mhm.
And he never asked me again. I
Unfortunately,
mean, that
that
was
song "Cats in the
ever.
Cradle" is so
Yeah. And
for
yeah.
authors.
And so from the 7th grade till now, and now we're good friends. But
Yeah.
from the 7th grade until probably, and then he went away to the Air Force Academy and got married and got his, he just never, until now we're going hunting together and fishing together and stuff like that because they moved up here. But for years, I said no, and he wasn't mad at me. He just found somebody else to hang out with, and I just that gutted me. So I think about that a lot.
Yep. Yep.
Well,
That's the
Mark, hey,
price.
we want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us. Love talking to you whenever we can. Love to have you back on for the next book. Can't wait to see what you got coming. You kind of gave us a little inkling about what we're going to see, and that's exciting. So
Yes.
congratulations again. And, you know, glad you're kind of out of the Tom Clancy world. Love me some, you know, Marc Cameron solo books, and can't wait to see what the Boneyard's got to offer too.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thanks for having
Mark.
me. It's
Thanks.
always good to
Greatly
chat with you
appreciated.
guys.
Yep.
All right. Have a good one, man. Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care.